Hello, welcome to Only for Your Ears, and welcome to today's episode 17, A Mother's Love by Hans Christian Andersen. I've renamed it as The Power of a Mother's Unconditional Love. Let's begin with the structure as usual. We'll start off with a brief summary that highlights the most important points of the story. Then we'll move on to how my critical review and how it plays in today's society, using some of the sentences that I digressed in the summary to frame the actual critical review. Then I'll talk about the triggers that I saw in the story and how they triggered me and some of my personal experiences. Let's begin. Once upon a time, there was a mother in such grief over the loss of her dearest child, she couldn't reconcile the aspects of love and loss, life and death. This fairy tale tackles these main issues. The story of A Mother's Love by Hans Christian Andersen is a poignant and emotional fairy tale about love, loss, and the power of a mother's love. The story follows a mother whose child becomes gravely ill and dies. I digress. I can't imagine the pain of losing a child you actually gave birth to, slipping away before your eyes and feeling powerless. In her grief, she sets out on a journey, like a spiritual awakening, I suppose, to bring her child back from the realm of death. I digress. We often turn to strengthening our faith in the hope that a miracle will magically erase the reality that we've just experienced. This is very true. On her quest, the mother encounters various allegorical figures. I digress. This is typical to encounter symbolic people when on a spiritual journey, such as the old woman of sorrow who teaches her that grief is a necessary part of life. She also meets the gardener of the Garden of Paradise who shows her the beauty of life despite the pain and suffering it contains. I digress. Unfortunately, the nuggets of wisdom we gather through immense pain, sadness, and are irreplaceable. The mother endures various hardship and sacrifices to continue her journey, driven by her deep love for her child. I digress. I believe this mother's journey is what you'd call in today's society an awakening and a deep dose of hard, strong medicine that says you have to accept what has just happened. In search of herself from the unspeakable pain, she survived. Ultimately, the mother confronts the angel of death, who agrees to return her child on the condition that she brings 3 warm tears from a person who has never grieved. I digress. This is an impossible condition. The angel has asked the mother to realize. The mother searches for such a person, but ultimately realizes that all human beings experience sorrow and grief in their lives. I digress again. Through the help of the angel's request, the grieving mother realizes she's not alone and that so many people have experienced the same thing. This is very true, people, but it's really hard for us to get to that place where we realize we are not alone, because our grief and our sadness makes us feel as though we're the only person going through it, and that's been through something like this. And it's not true. It's being able to overcome the sadness and the grief that makes us feel alone. and then we're able to have compassion and empathy for other people that's experienced the same thing. In the end, the mother is unable to fulfill the angel of death's condition. I digress. This was the lesson she was expected to pass, but she learns to accept the natural order of life and death. The story concludes with the mother finding solace in her faith, trusting that her child is in a better place and accepting the inevitability of loss. I digress. In the end, it always boils down to faith. And what is faith in the end? It's a complete confidence in someone or something. This is an interesting and powerful story. Someone told me a long time ago, death is not for the people that have passed on. Rest in peace. Death is for the living. And it's a hard lesson to endure and to overcome that loss. And do we ever really overcome the loss of a loved one, especially a child? Let's move on to my critical review. This is a heartfelt story that touches people's souls no matter when it was written, because it still cuts into the person's veins, into a person's veins today. A mother's love, or the power of a mother's unconditional love, can never be replaced or substituted. It doesn't matter whether it's your biological or adoptive mother. In spite of my own dysfunctional relationship I had with my mother, I can recognize through being a mother to my inner child how incomparable it is to any kind of relationship. A very narrow second is a father's love, and strength runs in close parallel. There are some good films and documentaries that demonstrate this kind of love. Now, this is Pride Week, people, and I saw an incredible. I work at a community center, and there was some films and documentaries on display for Pride Week. There's a wonderful film about a man that is a cross-dresser that had an incredible abusive background. The mother blamed him for the death of the youngest child, a boy, which he had nothing to do with. She blamed him and she abused him mentally and emotionally. She withheld from him. And the father had him having relations with his own sister. Therefore, he grew up really messed up with these two people that were supposed to be examples of adult human beings, and they were negligent in their relation towards him and probably the outside world too. It was absolutely wonderful. I think it's called Leslie. It's absolutely beautiful. Let's continue. Some of the films that remind me about a mother's love is the film Beaches, Dead Man Walking, and Little Women. Let's look at the sentence that I have chosen to help frame this particular review. I digress. I can't imagine the pain of losing a child you gave birth to, slipping away before your eyes and feeling powerless. In her grief, she sets out on a journey to bring her child back from the realm of death. Now, I'm reminded of the film Beaches in this case. Now, it's not her child that's slipping away. It's a dear friend, a childhood friend that's slipping away. It's a wonderful film about true friends about true friends that really love each other. It's about a debutante who's very beautiful and is an heiress and becomes a lawyer, and a struggling entertainer. Barbara Hersey plays the beautiful friend, and Bette Midler plays the star in this great movie that explores all the ups and downs in friendships between childhood women friends. Competition and jealousy and love, hate persist through the film almost until the end. Hilary, of course, is a beautiful debutante, and Cece is a struggling Broadway performer. During this time, during their period together, Cece gets a wonderful job in an off-Broadway show, and the director falls madly in love with Hilary, of course. They get into a relationship, and Cece is really mad and jealous, of course, thinking that you just take everything from me. Well, the relationship breaks up, and eventually Cece marries the man, the director of the theatre production. And Hilary ends up marrying a very wealthy lawyer because she's a lawyer herself. And during this time, they had their relationship. Their lives sort of split because they're in different relationships now with people, but they still keep in touch. But it's a different type of relationship. It's more distant. And around the same time, both Hilary and Cece find themselves going through a divorce. And at the same time, while Hilary is going through a divorce, she's also pregnant with her soon to be ex husband's child, baby. Or she decides to have the child, and Cece and Hilary decide to move in and live together. Why not, of course? Good friends. And what happens later on is that Cece is terminally ill. After she's had the baby, she becomes terminally ill when the child is about 5 or 6 years old and dies. And before she dies, she asks her good friend, the friend that she's been in competition with for so long and so much jealousy between them and hurt. She says, I ask you to look after my child. I ask you to be her mother. And it's incredible touching film. And Bette Midler becomes the adoptive mother, which, as I said, it's the same as being a biological mother. It's exactly the same. Once you adopt a child, you cannot give it back. And that is your love. And of course, the daughter looks so much like a good friend. And the love that she pours into her is double love. And it's an amazing story. And it's an amazing story of unconditional love, not only for her friend, but for the child that she raises. The next one is Dead Man Walking. Now, this is about mothers, but the mother's role can take on different forms. It doesn't have to be that you're a biological mother. I'm not a biological mother at all, and I'll explain my situation too. Now, Dead Man Walking is an extraordinary film with Susan Sarandon and Sean Penn. This is about a nun that acts as a spiritual mother to Sean Penn, who's on death row. This wonderful and heartfelt, authentic story about a young man who has to reconcile himself with his demons through the genuine love of a nun. She helps him, who helps him face his sentence. She prepares him to see her face and the love of God for him in her eyes. She says, when they do that thing to you, imagine me, see my face and God's face embracing you, or God just embracing you. The unrelenting love that she showered the man on death row was so unconditional, it mirrored a mother's heart and devotion to her own child. And when he died, she was right there. And she was on her knees and she spent the longest time praying for his life, just praying for his life and sending him to God. And this is a true, wonderful example of love again. Non-judgmental love, unconditional love, and non-judgmental love. It would be so easy to judge him. He's a criminal. He's on death row. But she didn't. She just showered him with as much spiritual love and blessings that she could to prepare him for his final hours and the ultimate death that he experienced. And this is another example of the power of unconditional, of the power of a mother's unconditional love. Now, Little Women is one of those films and stories that never loses its popularity. It's amazing. It's about the mother of 4 or 5 girls, I believe. I think it's 4 girls, while their father is away during the Civil War, being a chaplain to the military. She finds herself playing the role of a single mother for the most part of the book and the film. Now, you can imagine the time that this book was written. Could you imagine being a single parent to 4 children? Now, I'm sure everybody knew that the husband was away being a chaplain, but in the eyes of society, when you see that the missing part of the family, the patriarch, is missing, people talk. You can't help it. People talk. Yes, we know that they have a father, but he's not around. People talk. So I think she was pretty brave to do this during this time. She plays the role of a single woman for the most part of the book and the film. The girls refer to her, their mother, with affection. They refer to her as Mame. It's almost like she's a mother, she's a sister, and she's a friend. She's a charity worker who wants her little women to grow up caring and selfless. She deals with a romantic older daughter. The second child is tempestuous, who challenges her because the mother is a very lively, gregarious, hardworking, optimistic type person. So the second child really challenges her with being so tempestuous, and I believe reminds her of herself. The third child is unfortunately sick and poorly, and she's shy and very studious introvert who can play the piano. And the last girl, who is tremendously ambitious, Amy, wants to be the queen of the world, basically. She wants to be of the higher upper echelons. Mame looks for creative solutions to problems and is productive in getting things done. She prefers her daughters to marry into poverty and experience unconditional love than being of the higher echelons of society. Mama also endures the ultimate passing of her third youngest child. She respectfully grieves her passing, but is very attentive to her daughter's needs and loss too. Here's a woman that is a single mother for the most part of the book and loses her third child because she was sickly and poorly, and still has room in her heart not only to grieve her own loss, but she pours out as much empathy and sympathy and compassion to her own children that must be missing their, their deceased sister, that of course has gone up to heaven in their eyes. So these are three examples that I found, that I felt that still pertains to today's society, and how a mother's love is really the root of how so many people are in society. The father plays an interesting role, a very important role, but the mother always seems to play the most poignant role of all. Now, I'd like to move on to the trigger points. Let's take a look at some of the trigger points here. I'm going to take a look at the Colombian mother, and me being a mother too, and I will take a look at Sinead O'Connor, Mrs. Hockley, Dylan's mother of Sandy Hook, who received the Medal of Freedom, and Matthew Shepard's mother and father, who received the Medal of Freedom. And I will give you examples as to why this triggered me. Not necessarily you, but triggered me. So the Colombian mother is amazing. The father of two of the children, Manuel Rock, and told reporters on Sunday that his wife Magdalena had survived the crash but perished 4 days later. This was in the news recently. There was a small twin-engine plane that was flying over the Amazon and came down. The 4 adults on the plane died, and the 4 children made it. There's an interesting part here. My daughter has told me that their mother was alive for 4 days. So the oldest child, you had one that was 13 and you had one that was 12 months. The oldest child, they were all of indigenous background. The oldest child told the father, he said, our mother was alive for 4 days, but she was trapped. Before she died, she said to them, maybe you should go. You guys are going to see the kind of man your dad is, and he's going to show you the same kind of great love that I have shown you. The children aged 13, 9, 4, and 11 months, not 12 months, 11 months, were traveling with their mother from the Amazonian village to San Jose when their plane crashed after the pilot reported engine failure in the early hours of May 1st. What triggered me about this example? Well, what was interesting is that the mother selflessly, she said, you go. I've taught you everything you know to survive in the jungle. You know what berries to eat, you know what food to eat, you know what food you can't eat. You go. I'm I'm useless here. I'm trapped. I will not make it. You go. Can you imagine that? I have to say this, people, from my own experience dealing with my mother, who, yes, was toxic and wasn't well and was a malignant narcissist, that I'm not sure if she would have been that generous and that selfless. She would have insisted that I stay with her because she was always so afraid. This woman is different. An indigenous woman with her children, and she loved them so much. She said, I know what I've given you. Go. And it triggered me. This triggered me. It really triggered me a lot because it reminded me of what I'm thinking about. My lack mentality now. My mentality now is going back to what I didn't have as a child, what I didn't have when I was growing up. And when you see examples of this Colombian woman who just selflessly gives, it hurts. But while it hurts and while I feel triggered, I find myself realizing, yes, Melody, you are triggered. But I also realize how far I have come in becoming my own mother to myself and to my inner child. So this is an incredible story. They just survived 40 days in the Amazon jungle and were rescued. And I can tell you now, the mother's love will always be with those children. They will always remember how courageous and how incredible she was and what she taught them and how much she loved them, how much she loved them to let them go in spite of herself and her situation. Talking about love, I'm a mother to myself. Yes, I'm a mother to myself. This has been a long, arduous journey for me because, as you know, I didn't have the best example of a mother in my own life. But I realized because of her own demons, she did the best that she could. A mother to myself and a mother to my inner child. In the past and now, I still feel the injustice. It's the injustice that triggered me. The injustice of having to do what my parents couldn't. The injustice of having to do what my parents should have been able to do in spite. They should have found a way, find a way, but they couldn't. I feel the injustice, and the injustice pulls at my triggers. Having to heal generational karma is heavy, but I but did I really volunteer for this? I'm not sure if I did, but I'm sure upon second thoughts, I probably did volunteer to do this, probably out of guilt because I was born when I shouldn't have been born. And I was a failure when it comes to my parents' marriage. And so I always feel as though, yes, I probably did volunteer to carry this karma to make up for not being the perfect child that I should have been. So I always feel this sense of how can I repay them? How can I make up for the guilt that I felt? And really, the guilt was pushed down onto me. It's not something that I just came up with. But anyway, the sense of injustice. I've learned to be a mother to myself, to nurture myself, to experience self-love. And what I found most recently, that I love being alone. I love sitting alone. I love working alone. And what I noticed that when I'm alone, and even when I'm experiencing a little bit of sadness, when I'm alone, I don't feel incomplete anymore. I feel like a complete whole person, even though I'm sad, because I've learned to fill myself up, whether it be with self-like or self-love. I've also learned to be kind to my inner child, to be kind to that little girl. That helped me. She was like a mother to me. My inner child was like a mother to me, helping me and saying, please, 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 you've come this far. In a poem that I wrote, you've come this far. Hold my hand and let's go the distance when it comes to healing. And being a mother to her is really quite rewarding. One of the most rewarding things that I could have done for myself is to love myself, be a mother to myself, and be a mother to my inner child. The last part is talking about Mrs. Hockley, Dylan's mother from Sandy Hook. Now, Mrs. Hockley, Mr. Hockley. Dylan was an autistic child that went to Sandy Hook. And I think it was in 2012, December of 2012, a young man, a 17, 18-year-old man that had identity issues, not sexual identity issues, but just identity issues because he was different. He didn't fit in, which is still a big problem in today's society. And his mother looked after him and she tried to help him become more included in society. Well, he learned how to hunt and fire guns. And one morning he went up, he took a double barrel gun and a magazine, shot his mother to death, and then went to Sandy Hook and shot 20 young children between the age of 5 and 7. That was in Connecticut, the United States, and then shot 7 adults. And what was most compelling about this story, when they buried Dylan, they buried him with his soccer outfit and his shoes, because there was nothing much left of him after the gunman emptied the gun on him. And what was most interesting is that his teacher, that he had a really good connection with, chemistry with, released all the other children. She had rescued all the other children and put them in a closet. She opened the door. She said, go out the back door. Go, go, go. You're free. And one of the little children said to her, why don't you come with us, miss? Come with us. And she said, no. She knelt down beside Dylan. She said, I must be with Dylan. And she hugged him and she stayed with him. And then the gunman shot them both, but not in front of the other child. They had children. They had already gone. And through this, the parents have been extraordinary. The mother is very philosophical and reflective about her love for her son, Dylan, her autistic son. And which is what God would say, the disabled children, especially, are God's special children. They received the Medal of Freedom, and all the parents who lost children that day and the adults that were killed, including the headmistress, their families received the Medal of Freedom. The next one is Matthew Shepard's mother. Now, Matthew Shepard is, and the father too, they received a Medal of Freedom. Matthew Shepard was a beautiful, absolutely beautiful looking gay man, about 18 years old. And of course, we still have problems in today's society with people's sexual identity and people's identity in general. Again, it's coming back to the ugly duckling. If you do not fit in, people find a reason to hate on you. It has nothing to do with you in the end. It has everything to do with their own insecurity and their fear about themselves. Well, they attacked him outside a gay bar. A very gentle, small guy. And they beat him up and they impaled him on this wire fence and he bled to death. And I mean, it was just awful. And people were just outraged by this. And the whole communities, not just the gay community, the whole community was absolutely outraged by what happened to this young man, I should say. And I think it was in 2009, 2009 or 10. Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That horrible ban for the military was released, was thrown out, and the High Court Supreme Judge, I think it was in 2012 or 2014, allowed same-sex couplings as for marriages and unions. And Matthew Shepard and Harvey Milk, they were given the Medal of Freedom. Matthew's mother is so adoring of her son, and so is the father. Unconditional love. Unconditional love. And last but not least, I'd like to just mention about Sinead O'Connor. Sinead O'Connor, a very heroic woman, sent out a tweet on July 17th to all the mothers that have survived their children of committing suicide and overdose. And Sinead O'Connor is also a survivor of this, or she was. When her son died of an overdose about 4 years ago, it devastated her. And unfortunately, she never really got over it. And I believe that she passed away on the 26th, Wednesday the 26th, which was 2 days ago. So I just want to say, rest in peace, Sinead O'Connor. You did a lot of good. You spoke up in places about abuse when nobody else had the courage to do it. And I'm sure you were an incredible mother in your own right. So rest in peace, Sinead O'Connor. The love, the unconditional, the power of the unconditional love of a mother. I hope you enjoyed this particular segment. So we're going to finish now. I'd just like to say, please give me a thumbs up. Send me some love, please. Send me some mother love if you can, some mother's love. And also send me a comment if you would like to. And subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. I'd also like to mention just my roommate. I live in a shelter. My roommate is in very bad condition. She's terminally ill, and I would like to send out a blessing to her. And if you could pray for her too, I'd really appreciate it. So I'll finish off with my usual sentence. Healing is a lifelong lesson, blessing, and gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Healing is a lifelong lesson, blessing we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Look after yourself, people. Feel blessed, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.